Hello friends. Friends, today we are going to discuss about the difference between simile and metaphor. Friends, the students of English literature generally come across these terms simile or metaphor or hyperbole, climax, anti-climax and alliteration, apostrophe and so on. Friends, these are all different figures of speech used by the poets in literature. Metaphor or simile, they are known as different poetic devices. They are also known as different poetic techniques as used by the poets, and these poetic devices are used by the poets to express the idea in the most effective manner, in the most impressive manner. And friends, this is the basic difference between the language of the common man and the language of the poet. The poet's language is flowery language. The poet's language is artistic language. What makes it artistic? Use of figures of speech like simile and metaphor and many more make the poet's language more poetic than the language used by the common men and women. Okay, now let's come to the main idea of the discussion between the difference between the simile and metaphor. Friends, in fact, simile and metaphor both are figures of speech, both are ornaments of language. Okay, and both are used to compare two different objects or ideas in poetry. Simile is actually a subcategory of metaphor. That means all similes are metaphors, but all metaphors are not similes. First, let's begin with what a simile is. Simile is a figure of speech. It is a poetic device in which a comparison, a kind of comparison is done by the poets. This comparison is done between two different objects, but the comparison is done only when there is some common element between these two different objects. Say for example, a poet compares the face of his lady with the moon. Okay, so moon is one object and the face of the lady is another object. But what is common element between these two? Both are fair and beautiful. So fairness or beauty is the common element between these two objects, and that's why the poet may compare the face of the lady with the moon. Moreover, one very important thing to note about simile is that in simile, the poets use the words like or as, for this comparison. Say for example, somebody is fighting and the poet or a person says this sentence, he fought like a lion. So, he is one object and lion is another object. Okay, he is compared with the lion. So, what is similarity between some common element is there between he and the lion, and that's why the poet may compare him with the lion and say that he fought like a lion. Let's take one more example from English literature. William Wordsworth, a poet of nature. He has written a poem called Daffodils. Daffodils is the name of a flower. So, he has written a poem, The Daffodils, in which the poem begins with this line, I wandered lonely as a cloud. Right? Mark the use of the word as, A-S. Okay? The poet has compared himself with the cloud. He says, I wandered lonely as a cloud. Means the poet wants to say, I was wandering just like a cloud which is wandering in the sky. Okay? So, comparison is done. This is the use of simile. Another example, as you can see on the screen, Forrest Gump, in which life is compared with a box of chocolates, right? Life is like a box of chocolate. Here mark the use of the word like, L-I-K-E. Life is compared with chocolate. So, this is an example of a simile. Let's come now to discuss metaphor. Metaphor is also a figure of speech, in which comparison is done, but here the comparison is done directly. One thing is presented not like the other thing, but one thing is presented as another thing, and this creates a kind of rhetorical effect in poetry. Here, unlike simile, in metaphor, the words like or as are not used by the poets. In the first simile, I gave you the example, he fought like a lion. But the same thing if you want to say by using metaphor, then you can say he was a lion in the fight. Means here we don't say he fought like a lion, but we say he was a lion in the fight. So, this is the difference between simile and metaphor. Let's take one more example from English literature. William Shakespeare, a great tragedy writer, and he has written this comedy, a romantic comedy, As You Like It. This is the title. In this comedy, Shakespeare has compared the world with a stage and compared men and women with the players, the actors on the stage. All the world is a stage and all the men and women merely players, right? So, here the poet William Shakespeare doesn't say that the world is like a stage. The poet here says the world is a stage itself, right? So, what is the difference between metaphor and simile? After understanding what a simile is and what a metaphor is, we can come to this conclusion that a simile is saying something is like something else. In simile, the poet says that something, one object, is like the another object. But on the other hand, in metaphor, the poet says that something is something else. Okay? So, this is the basic difference. Another difference is that simile is a type of metaphor and all similes have to be metaphors, but all metaphors are not similes. So, friends, I hope the idea is clear to you. If you have any doubts or questions, do write to me in the comment section of this channel. Thank you very much.